There are moments when words that are intended to inspire reveal more than what was intended. Moments when an organization condemns the behavior it quietly depends on. What happens when a message in a religious broadcast becomes a mirror and an image reflected back exposes the contradiction? If you are new here, welcome to our channel. A channel manipulative religious leaders wish you never discover. If you crave for deep dives that cut through the noise, subscribe and smash the notice bell for more. Today I examine a JW talk about obedience. On the surface, the governing body is teaching humility and loyalty. But beneath the surface, something else emerges. And by the end of this deep dive, I'll be surprised if you won't be shocked by what emerges. Let's begin. Obedience always leads to success. The speaker says that David's counsel to Solomon shows a universal rule, that obedience always leads to success. Now this ties directly into the JW belief that obedience to the governing body, including contacting the hospital liaison committee, is divinely blessed. Here is the clip.
Let's consider together the context of today's text. And from there, we can extract a key principle for all of us. So let's please read 1 Kings chapter 1, verse 1 Kings chapter 2, sorry. And in verse 1, we have the setting. Notice 1 Kings 2, verse 1, the setting. When the time of David's death drew near, he gave his son Solomon these instructions. So these are David's parting words. Verse 2, which is today's text, be strong and prove yourself a man. But notice verse 3, there we'll find a key principle. So David goes on to say, you must keep your obligation to Jehovah your God by walking in his ways and by observing his statutes. And he went on, so we can stop there. So if we were to summarize thus far what David said, with one word, what would it be? Obedience. So if Solomon was obedient, what would be the result? Notice that part of verse 3, David goes on to say, then the effect of obedience, you will succeed in everything you do and everywhere you turn. Powerful. So here's our key principle then. Obedience always leads to success. And that was true in the case of Solomon. As long as he was obedient, he was successful.
Now, this is a bold claim that the speaker has made, that obedience always leads to success. But the biblical record itself contradicts this. Job obeyed and suffered. Jeremiah obeyed and was persecuted. Jesus obeyed and was executed. Now, it's important to understand that obedience in the Bible is not always transactional. It's not a vending machine where loyalty produces predictable rewards. So to tell members that obedience always leads to success is questionable. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it produces the opposite results. Yet in this talk, obedience is redefined, not as faithfulness to God, but faithfulness to the organization instructions, especially relating to medical decisions. A belief that is based on total biblical ignorance. This turns a biblical principle into a mechanism of control, where success becomes synonymous with compliance. A so-called universal principle becomes a tool of institutional reinforcement. Let's look at theme number 2, Daniel as a model of blood refusal. The decision that Daniel made with his friends not to partake of the food that was sacrificed to idols becomes an example of blood refusal. Now, Daniel's refusal to eat the food that was defiled is equated to modern refusal of blood transfusion. The speaker says Daniel needed assistance and compares his resistance with the work of the HLC, Health Liaison Committee. This is the committee which the governing body has formed so that if you have a medical issue that requires blood, you contact them and then they'll give you advice. Here is the clip.
But now let's apply this principle in the life of Daniel and to see how it proved to be also successful, like the principle applied in his life. So let's please turn to Daniel chapter 1. We'll apply the principle in the context of Daniel arriving in Babylon. And we'll see how Daniel's actions then can mirror the actions of hospital liaison committees worldwide. So Daniel chapter 1, let's see the principle again. So in verse 8, notice Daniel's determination to be obedient to Jehovah. Daniel 1 verse 8, we read, "But Daniel resolved in his heart that he would not defile himself with the king's delicacies." Why did he not want to eat the king's delicacies? Probably some of the meat probably was not properly bled. So Daniel wanted to obey God's law on blood. Same with us. We are determined to obey Jehovah's law on blood. But in order for Daniel to be resolved, to be obedient, he realized he would need assistance. So what did he do? Verse goes on to say, so he asked the principal court official for permission not to defile himself in this way. And same is true today. In order to obey God's law and blood, we need assistance from doctors who are able, who are willing to respect our stand on blood. Because of the tireless effort of the HLCs to build and maintain relationship with doctors, the arrangement has proved to be successful. And that was also true in the case of Daniel. Notice in verse 9 what we read. Verse 9 goes on to say, "And the true God caused the principal court official to show Daniel favor," according to footnote, "kindness and mercy." Daniel was successful. And sure enough, because of the hard work of HLCs around the world for many years, we now have upwards of over 100,000 doctors worldwide who are willing to treat Jehovah's Witnesses in respect to their stand on blood. Similarly, today, the HLC members do not limit themselves to just a few cooperative doctors. They keep knocking on doors. They keep searching for doctors who are willing to treat us in respect to Jehovah's law. And what was the result? In verse 12, so Daniel, verse 12, notice what he tells the guardian. He says, "Please test your servants for 10 days. So Daniel is making a presentation to this guardian, showing, hey, there's a different approach. Can we try something different? Same with the HLCs. Can we try something different than blood, a different modality, a different approach? And what was the result? Verse 13. So the guardian, he agreed to their proposal and tested them for 10 days. Similarly, today, HLC members are making presentations. In fact, in recent years, the organization has provided a new PowerPoint presentation to the HLCs to make presentation to doctors. We saw the principle in the case of Daniel. He was obedient, and Jehovah blessed his obedience. Same is true today. Jehovah has blessed our obedience to abstain from blood. By means of the HLC arrangement, their effortless, tireless work has yielded good results, having doctors who are willing to care for our needs.
Here is a mistake that the speaker made, including the governing body and the JW as a whole. When Daniel refused, he did so because of the food purity. It was not for medical reasons, because the food was sacrificed to idols. That was the reason why Daniel refused to partake of the food. It had nothing to do with blood transfusion. It was not because that food posed a medical risk. There wasn't a medical procedure, no risk of death. Of course, except a risk of death for refusing to partake of the food. So it is totally wrong to use the example of Daniel to tell people to refuse blood transfusion. Every time I'm watching a JW talk, I'm always waiting for a moment when the scripture will be twisted to manipulate the members. And sometimes it starts very well. The interpretation in many cases is scriptural right, hermeneutically correct. The problem comes to the application. So his stand cannot be used in the 21st century. And yet the organization uses what Daniel did as an example for refusing blood transfusion. But Daniel acted for personal conviction. There was no one else who was telling him to do that. He was not forced by anybody. And it was not done under the oversight of a religious committee. He was in a foreign land. He took a stand against eating food sacrificed to idols. Ironically, the lesson of Daniel is independence, whilst the lesson being taught in this broadcast is dependence on organizational intermediaries. Theme 3. Contact HCL early. Members are urged to contact the HLC as early as possible. Even if blood is not expected to be involved, the speaker claims this saves lives. Here's the clip.
Now, question for you and for me. How can we support this beautiful arrangement, this loving arrangement, this powerful arrangement Jehovah has put in place? Two things we can do. Number one, we want to follow the direction that the governing body provided to us just over 2 years ago. You remember the announcement that was made in January 2023, where we were encouraged to contact the HLC as early as possible when we face a medical situation, even if we don't think blood will be an issue, because earlier is better. And we're happy to see that worldwide the friends are following this direction, and the result is that the number of emergencies have come down, and that is so heartwarming. We are saving lives. We're saving lives. So it's heartwarming to see that this obedience to Jehovah's organization direction is yielding good result. So number one, how we can support, contact the HLC as early as possible. And we want to encourage the friends in our congregation to do so as well. Number two, let's pray for these brothers and their families. When you think about it, how much would we pay someone to be on call 24/7? How much would we pay? But this is the reality for HLC members. So how much we are grateful to Jehovah and to these brothers and their families for their self-sacrificing spirit, helping us to obey God's law and blood, and which has yielded good result. So we saw the principle in the case of Daniel. He was obedient, blessing resulted. We are obedient today, following Jehovah's direction, following his law, and we are blessed. So let's remember this principle. Obedience always leads to success.
On the surface, this sounds like care, but beneath it, it is surveillance. If members report every medical issue early, not for help, but for oversight, then the freedom to make private decisions dissolves. The message is clear. Medical decisions are not yours. They are organization property. Daniel asked an official for permission, but Jehovah's Witnesses must ask the organization. There is a difference, and it's not a small one. Now, what you have seen here is not teaching, it's a pattern. A pattern where obedience becomes control. And it's important to know that obedience doesn't always lead to success because of this misguided teaching on obedience. What are your views on this talk? Do you agree with what the speaker was saying or you don't? Put your comments below. If you've enjoyed this deep dive, like, subscribe, and smash the notice bell for more. To watch another deep dive that I've done on Do Not Judge, click on this link. To watch other breakdowns of JW Talks, click on this link.